Okay, welcome back, everyone. As we move into the final portion of our gathering, I'm going to invite Maysa to start us off just summarizing the various sessions that we've had. And then if Jabala or Ezwa have anything to add, we'll invite them to do so. So Maysa, I'll hand over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Can you hear me okay? Good. Did you want me to start from like day one or the sessions from, okay, just making sure. Okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we started, I guess, on the first, I guess it wasn't a session, but like the introduction to this kind of 3-day conference to start it off in a good way. We had like a bit of an introduction from Elder, I know his last name was Gomez. I think his first name was
Sempulian.
Sempulian Gomez. He told us a bit about the history of his family. And one of the things I remember is he was talking about how his great grandmother, I believe, her family, their land was on what is now Stanley Park in Vancouver, and how they were evicted from that place, and kind of, although we're doing truth and reconciliation in Canada, the city of Vancouver hasn't really acknowledged that history. So it's very difficult to move forward in this process without that kind of acknowledgement. So he kind of got us started with a song and a prayer. And then Simi Ghazi, who I guess is a Muslim scholar and instructs Arabic at UBC, also gave us some beautiful recitations of Surah Al-Fatiha to kind of open us and ground us, as well as Surah Teen to kind of invoke the earth and remind us that we have like a shared call of between kind of Muslims and Indigenous people of being called by the land to work together and to work towards God. So from that introduction, we moved to the first session, which was about setting the table. And yeah, just like how do we set the table, especially moving forward with this topic, with Omar Yaqub and Alexander Dirksen, with Elder Sempulian. So they talked a bit about Omar works with IFSA Family Services in Edmonton, and Alexander Dirksen, I believe, is from a Métis Nation, I think also in Treaty 6. And they were kind of speaking about, well, they were kind of reflecting with Elder Sempulian. One of the things I guess I recall is they were talking about these similarity, a similar importance between Muslim and Indigenous values of kinship and the preservation of lineage, and how that poses some issues with adoption, and how fostering is very important. They also talked about how there are many, I think Elder Sempulian was speaking about how there are indeed, if people are interested in learning more, there are many Musqueam families who are willing to share and kind of bring people in and teach. They have many public ceremonies, and they were also speaking about the importance of fostering Indigenous children and helping with that, but not severing children from their families. So those are my incomplete, it's not exactly a summary, but those are some of the points I took away. And then next we moved into a session by Erin Cervantes, who was, I believe, located in Toronto, about Muslims in Turtle Island in Abiyala. And she was kind of speaking about the many kind of complexities and intersections of white supremacy, Islamophobia, and then anti-indigeneity and anti-Afro-indigeneity. So she kind of brought up a lot of, yeah, I feel like what she brought up was really a lot of complexities. So she was talking about colonialism and white supremacy, and how we're kind of all, our identities are all kind of mixed up, and we're stuck in this colonial matrix. And how can Muslims engage in doing good work without becoming bogged down in issues of like identity politics that end up disenfranchising other people because we're not always mindful of all the different intersectionalities of indigeneity and Afro-indigeneity, and that, you know, Muslims can be many different things. And one of the things I think that was kind of new for me from that session. So she also explained some terminology. She explained where the term turtle island comes from, and then she was explaining that Abiela is a term used by Indigenous people to describe South America in a non-colonial way, and that these names are a rejection of colonial relations. And she also invited us to reflect upon the question, what is my relationship to these lands as a Muslim? And we had some reflection around that. Then next we moved into a session with Sister Timiro Mohammed, who is a poet. I think she does many things. That is one of the things. And it's hard to, I don't know if I can really summarize that session, because it was very, it was very like, I guess hands-on, and involved a lot of personal reflecting. So she had a number of, she presented us with some poetry to reflect upon by Muslims, by Indigenous people, by African Canadian poets. And then she, one of the things, I guess, that I was reflecting on that she had invited us to think about was how the displacement from the land is connected to displacement from self. And that was really something that was reflected in the poems she opened with. And then we also had some discussion of kind of making dua, like making a land acknowledgement in the form of dua, which was also something I was thinking about. So yeah, she had a lot of prompts that we were kind of invited to write about, and I believe, Aslam, she had given a document that maybe people could access if they want to see that later. And then from that, we closed the day with a final session, the first day, September 1st, by Anushka Azadi, who I don't know how to describe who she is in short term. I think she has a bio. I'll just say she's a human being. She seems like she's doing a lot of things, and she gave a very, I really enjoyed the presentation. She gave a very rich kind of reflection on, you know, what it means to be human, and her journey of being human, and kind of rejecting, you know, all these kind of capitalist labels and constructions around her life, and returning to the land, and work and kind of living among and with Indigenous people as part of her healing process, and how that has really kind of transformed her life and her way of looking at the world. There's obviously a lot more to say, but I don't know if I can summarize everything she said, so I think I might leave it there for the first day. Should I continue to the second day, or did anyone want to jump in?
Perhaps as well, Jabala, if there's anything else from the first day that was missed in the summary.
Sorry, I missed what you said. My internet cut out a little bit there towards the end of both of you. Yeah, I think you're doing a great job summarizing. I'm not the greatest at summarizing. I'm here focusing more on what Spirit's telling me. Listening, just keeping myself open to what Great Spirit's bringing forth. So I think that from that angle, I would say from day one till now that we can see that obviously there was some really good planning that went around the presentations, and Spirit is moving things in a good way. So that's my contribution to the summary. I think we're going in a good place. And if you want to just continue, Maysa, thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Jabala. I was taking notes for the summary. That's why I've got it now. Okay, so yeah, I'll give a summary of what we did on the second day as well. So yeah, September 2nd, we started off the day with a session by Fatima Jaffer, who is I think a photojournalist. I'm not sure exactly where she's located, but she was talking about photojournalism. And she, I guess for the details, you can look in the program. She was speaking about kind of how she had come to understand photography and photojournalism as a form of activism, and kind of really how her understanding had changed as she, was moving through her profession, and seeing that, you can do a lot of good with photojournalism as kind of with an outside gaze, but it was important for her to develop her understanding as more of an insider and forming relationships with people and Indigenous people when she was covering their stories. And that was kind of part of her feminist praxis. And how, it's for her, she sees that, although in journalism school, she may have been taught that a picture can tell the entire story, that in fact, she came to believe that you need, many pictures to focus on different aspects of the story to tell a more holistic, to give a more holistic idea of what's going on. And that it's also important to speak to the people and see what's important to them, and to provide those, and that she sees herself as kind of bearing witness by taking these pictures and contributing to history and archiving pictures of resistance for the different movements that she's been involved in. She also spoke about photography as storytelling from different angles, and really the importance of showing up to events and to marches, and showing up by reading and learning from Indigenous scholars and people, and showing up to all the places that were invited to show solidarity with Indigenous people, because there are many. And people kind of seem to ask, like, what should we do? And her answer is, well, show up to the places, start by showing up to the places where you're invited. And also she spoke about the importance of owning one's shit. There was, I think, a large focus. So yeah, just really being honest with yourself, and that, part of being brave is being honest with yourself and owning, what comes from yourself, and then standing up and taking risks for others who are in riskier situations than yourself. She also spoke about the importance of solidarity, and that she was kind of hesitant of the language of allyship, but she really saw solidarity as kind of like a constant work that you have to really do every day, to kind of have deep and real conversations and then act upon them. So then, moving from her presentation, we had a shared presentation by Nada Almasi and Yasminullah, and they were talking about, it was called Searching for Home, Indigeneity, Displacement, and Colonization. And so Nada is, her family is Palestinian, but her family was displaced, so she was born in Libya. And she immigrated to Canada. And Yasmin is a Rohingya Muslim activist, and they were kind of, so they gave presentations. Nada gave a presentation kind of on Palestine and about her family background, just to kind of bring us up to speed in case we missed some of that. And Yasmin also gave a presentation on I guess the history of Rohingya Muslims in Burma and Myanmar, and what has been happening, because it's a little bit less well known than what's going on in Palestine in general to many people. And they gave a lot of reflection on, given their identities, like where they've come from, and they've come to Canada, but Canada also has its own very problematic histories, just like the places, not just like, but as the places they've come from have problematic histories, so too does Canada. And then what does it mean for them? Because there's just all this complexity. So one thing that they reflected upon is the idea of nation states, and how, even though Canada is a nation state, gave them a home and belonging and citizenship, and that's like a beautiful thing to have as a displaced person in their countries or places of origin. Nation states are also a great source of pain and destruction, and like an erasure of culture and connection to the land. So that was something that they were reflecting upon. And then Nada kind of also brought us back to the idea that, despite all of the, these very heart-wrenching stories, she really believes that, in the Islamic kind of teaching, that if you have a seed, even if it's the last day, you should still plant it. And that, what Allah asks from people is that they put in the work, but the result is up to God. And there's always some kind of good in it, even if we don't see it. So from that, we moved to a session by Dr. Nandita Sharma about problematizing the claim to being a settler colonist. So as I understood it, I think my understanding of the session might have been a little bit off, but as I understood, she was kind of trying to thinking, or kind of maybe like an intervention into the I don't know if this is a mainstream debate. Maybe it's more a mainstream thing in academia, but in academia, there's kind of this framing of immigrants and migrants as being settler, as as people who immigrate or come as refugees to this land as being settlers or settler migrants. So she was kind of theorizing nationalism as being about separation, and that some people can be part of a nation, but a nation always excludes other people, and that nations are about territories and territories are about separated lands. And I think the crux of her message was that just that it can be problematic to get stuck in this idea that immigrants and migrants and refugees who come to Canada or come to North America end up being settler what's the word? End up being part of the settler problem, or that they should be described that way. I don't think she's like pretending that we're not here. She just kind of sees that as a dead end for activism, and that really what we should be doing is finding ways to work together, but not getting stuck in the idea that we're settler colonizers. And she was also kind of problematizing a bit the views of Indigenous national sovereignty, not to say that Indigenous people shouldn't have sovereignty or control of their land, but to point out that in other places in the world that has also that framing and that language has been used to cause violence, so that we need to, I think, be critical of how we use the language and what language is actually deployed to do in the world, and think about how those things are done. Okay, and that brought us to the end of the second day, I believe. There was a bit of a back and forth after that session, and then we closed, and that brings us to today. Aslam, do you want me to summarize today as well?
Yeah, I think some people might have joined late, so just like.
Oh, sure. I'll just be quick. So we started today with a session by Chris Corrigan, which was entitled problematizing the claim to being a sorry, that was yesterday. So the section we started with today was called Holding Faith on Stolen Lands, Lessons and Learnings from the United Church and a Path Forward. There was some really interesting stuff that Chris presented, just about some about the history of the United Church, and in the process of kind of forming an apology to Indigenous nations for harms perpetuated by the United Churches, or the churches that came to form the United Church, as well as for residential schools, and how they spent a lot of time crafting this apology and really thinking deeply about it, and presenting it to Indigenous elders. But then the apology, wasn't really accepted. It was they were thanked for the apology, but really, when it comes down to it, the proof of having good intentions and wanting to move forward in relationship is in the pudding, so to speak. I think that he mentioned that there's just some hesitance that apologies are symbolic, but what really the nations wanted to see is what you're going to do now. Like I think Jabala put in the chat, and also as Chris said, it's great to apologize, but we're here and we're here together, so now we want to see what can we do together. And so he also spoke a lot about what he's done in his own personal life, how that changed his personal kind of path as a faithful person, and how he decided to study, how he was kind of one of maybe the few people that were involved in that process that actually, as an individual, decided to change his life path and his interests. And he studied Indigenous history or Native history, or Native studies, and he's been kind of moving forward with that in his own work, and really taking on both institutional partnerships to do work as a through organizations, but also as an individual, really what the changes that commitment has brought in his own life. And then so that brings us to the session that we just finished, which was called Islamic Texts and Indigenous Rights, Rereading the Canon by Shadab Rahmatullah and Hazel Gomez. So I guess just very briefly, since we just came out of this session, Shadab was giving us kind of a taste of his work because he didn't have a lot of time. I think he might have provided a link in the chat to some of his like full lectures if people want to listen to them more fully later. Just really about how we can decolonize our understandings of Islamic texts. So he was specifically speaking about critiques of Exodus by scholars Edward Said, and I don't know Warrior's first name, but I'm sure the citation is there somewhere. And I think maybe if you could put in the chat, that would be great. Maybe kind of like a broad takeaway in summary is that there are different ways of kind of coming to Islamic texts with Indigenous rights in mind, and one way that Shadab finds helpful and has employed in his work is like really privileging political praxis as kind of like an ethical or moral compass in the readings of the Bible and the Quran, because you can consider, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, sorry. You can consider your kind of politics and ethics to be the root of your Islam. And that is kind of a way of going about this work. And then we just finished with Sister Hazel Gomez, who is also involved in a lot of community organizing. And she gave us kind of some very beautiful reflections on different, I guess, hadith and ayahs in the Quran that we can use to reflect as Muslims upon like what should we be doing, like given that we're here, how can we live ethically as Muslims? And she mentioned that being Muslim is not just an identity, it's an action. And so in submitting to God as Muslims, we can return to our sacred texts. And there are many concepts where she spoke about the earth as himma, as being held in trust. She mentioned a hadith about the consequences of taking land unjustly, and invited us to reflect upon what does that mean for us as Muslims on Turtle Island. And yeah, so she really drew upon our shared tradition as Muslims in that way. And I think that brings us to now. So now I'm speaking. So that is a summary, and I hope that wasn't too long. I'll let us get back to maybe group reflections.
Thank you so much, Maysa. And I think that was helpful for those of us who might have missed some sessions, or even just to jog our memories, because quite often we get in the moment itself and we forget what happened even 2 days ago. There was a question about the recordings that was posted in the chat, and the recordings will be up. Amal is doing a good job just editing and working through it, so that will be up by the end of tonight, hopefully, or tomorrow morning. So we'll share those out as long as the resources that have come out in the chat boxes. My invitation to everybody now is to do a couple of things. So the first is just to engage in your own reflection, right? So just take a few minutes by yourself. And this is also, funnily enough, from someone who's also part of the Secwepemc Nation, a friend of mine, Chris Archie, who has used this reflection invitation of head, heart, and hands. So quite often we're like really eager to go and do something, but just to take a moment and step back and think about, okay, what are the questions that are coming up for me? Maybe, out of this, if the only thing that comes out of it is like more questions that you want to pursue and answer for yourself, like note down, what are those questions? What are the thoughts or ideas that have come alive for you over the past few days? Then heart, like what feelings came up for you? Did you find something particularly challenging, triggering? Did you have any physical reactions to what was being presented? Do you have any spiritual reflections or openings? So this is to take it away from the typical academia, which is only in our head, but also to sort of ground ourselves in our bodies, in our hearts, and think about, what was going on for us as individuals, with bodies, with souls, as we experience these past few days. And then the question that is on everyone's minds, which is the hands. And over here, I want to say, like, what actions do we want to start? But also we need to make space for new actions. So also, what actions do we want to stop? Or what actions do we want to continue if we are already doing something? So the invitation is to take at least 2 or 3 minutes by yourself and try answer and reflect on some of these questions. And as you do that, I'll put you into breakout rooms with just 1 or 2 other people. And in that breakout room, you can share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. So you don't have to share everything, but just 1 or 2 things that came up for you that you feel comfortable sharing with others. If you want to add anything to the Padlet wall, the link is over there as well. Sometimes it happens that people aren't joining the breakout room that they were put into. So if that's the case, and after a couple of minutes, you're the only person in your room, just come back to the main room and then I'll put you into a different room so that you're not there by yourself. If you feel okay by yourself and you just want to be by yourself, that's okay as well. So we'll all be back here in 20 minutes from now, and then we'll do some group debrief, inshallah. Welcome back. I find facilitating on Zoom is like putting people into a black hole of breakout groups, and you have no idea what's going on there, and then you're just waiting for them to come back, and it's a very curious moment. Was that okay? Thumbs up, feeling good. Okay. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. I wanted to invite Talitha and Jabala to kind of be the first to share their reflections. And then we'll sort of open it up for a larger group conversation. And yeah, I'm curious to hear sort of anything that you want to share from, the action steps, or if it was just specific thoughts, questions, reflections that came up, just to enter into a group processing space. So Jabala, Talitha, I'll hand over to you.
Talitha, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi. I just gotta adjust my volume here because it's. So we had quite an intense discussion, Talitha and I, and it was great to sit here with one of my peacekeeper sisters from my tribe, because immediately when we were in our breakout, we had some very key things that had come up for both of us. And as much as many of you have acknowledged in the chat, and even acknowledged through your words to the group over the last few days, for some reason, these feelings are still lingering for us. And I think that they linger because we do see a danger moving forward in how the support will be distributed. So Talitha brought up, first of all, let's just talk about, actually, I'm gonna spin back, Talitha. We'll talk about the unceded part next, but if we can maybe get your reflections on the hereditary structures, or maybe some of the labels that are being put into, or how would I word it? Okay, let's just talk about the clan mothers. Can we do that? That's better. Let's talk about the women in the tribes, please.
Can everyone, the microphone is on, right? You can hear me? Okay, good. Hi, everyone. So my name's Talitha. I've been working with my sister Jabala for a long time now. Different things within our nation and upholding our tribal laws. And what this is focusing on bringing back our natural authority as mothers, as women. Many clan mothers were the ones who are the authority in nations across Turtle Island. So our laws are based on peace, on love, on nurturing, on caring for not only our babies, but everything that sustains life itself. And that is in many ways aligns with the universal laws. So we have many agreements and treaties pre-contact, and it's about decolonizing to bring back those natural systems and ways of life, ways of living, ways of being, ways of working together in all ways, in ways of peace, and that held a natural balance. So with my sister and with other women in my nation, that's what we've been working on, is building our women's council and bringing back that natural authority. So.
And so I think one important thing, because I love everything you said, but just for everyone here witnessing this, when we talk about women's authority, we're not referring to like a feministic type approach. Anybody who understands matrilineal law or matrilineal concepts, let's say, would agree that if a woman is in a place of leadership or authority, she actually is the voice of the collective. How does that happen? Because we're life givers. For some reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose us to be the ones that can bring forth life. And the reason for that, or sorry, what comes with that is our innate ability to act from the heart and to see things from everybody's view for the benefit of all. And even spiritually, I think that women have a way to hold humanity, and we do that alongside our brothers. And so to understand how a tribe really operates, we felt in our breakout that it's important to mention to you all to be cautious about leaning so heavily into giving power and authority to the hereditaries. And yes, I arrive here, and thank you, Aslam, for introducing me as princess of my nation, or even some describe me as a chiefess because of my lineage. I've gone through a lot of work myself to really think about how to present this in a good way. So a matriarch of a tribal nation would be somebody who helps the brotherhood decide how they will carry on their business. It would be, to go back, like Talitha said, to a pre-contact basis, meaning before any newcomers came and disrupt anything. We did have a very woman-influenced society where the men knew that they couldn't make an action without the insight of a loving woman. And then therefore we would work side by side in a very beautiful, harmonious way. And then came the newcomers. And in modern era, I've heard a lot of talk through these sessions about unceded lands. I made some comments in the chat box about the treaties. Talitha, if you can share some comments about your contentions with those sorts of terminology.
Yeah, for sure. So there's so much terminology these days that I'm finding that I have to correct myself on as I learn, relearn, or unlearn things that are being taught. So thanks, Jabala, for also clarifying about, we don't have any systems of hierarchy. It was never anything as a woman being an authoritative place. It wasn't like we were up here, no, we were all very equal. We worked alongside in a beautiful, harmonious way with our men, who also would have their own council, a fire council as well. And we would work together alongside each other. But yeah, what came up for me was hearing the term unceded. And as myself being a land defender and being present for many actions and speaking about things, I have often used that term, unceded. But what I have learned now is when we use this term, it can actually give power to the treaties, the numbered treaties across Turtle Island, in the way that we're saying that, okay, well, we're unceded, so they're ceded. And in saying that, we're saying that those treaties are valid, that they are law. And if you actually look into those treaties, they're not law. They're not legitimate law whatsoever. They're actually just a business agreement. All of them are business agreements. So we don't want to legitimize those business agreements as being treaties or law. There are laws here that predate everything, that are the true laws here of these lands. And the ones, you know, those kind of treaties, they call them treaties to kind of trick us into believing that that's a law made by our ancestors here, sitting at the table, when, you know, that's far from the truth. There was actually no true authorities sitting at those tables, and their business agreements. So we don't want to give any power to that in saying that we're unceded and the others are seated. So I didn't want to.
I think when you were saying, like in our breakout, you used the term power to their laws. And so when we start adopting terms of unceded versus ceded, or start putting in the minds of Muslims or immigrants that, oh, there's been some successful treaties. Well, when we do that and we start talking and adopting that terminology, Talitha and I agree that it feels more like we are actually giving power to the authority or the system, the state that has come in and said, okay. So we're trying to work out a conflict here. How about we come up with a treaty? Let's work out a mutual agreement. Meanwhile, we still weren't put as Secwepemc or tribal people, we weren't actually put in the place of true authenticity when it came to arriving to that table. We still had to operate and arrive to that table within their system. And so therefore, we're talking from a tribal basis. We want to go back to even predated systems. We want to go back to universal law, godly law, creator's law that guided us in how we entered into these agreements to work together as humans in humanity. And so that's why I think we both agreed. And Talitha, thank you for recognizing my Muslim brothers and sisters, their good hearts. And she shared with me that she sees that the Muslims are actually coming to the table with some very beautiful, authentic, God-given approaches. And through this session, I think that she can agree. She sees that the Muslims are seems to be operating from a pre-contact type mentality that goes right back to universal law, goes right back to its source, that being of Keltkukbit or Allah, as you might refer. And so thank you all for sharing your hearts, because I see that I have my sister here who recognizes it as well. And we both agreed that moving forward, we would love to have the work we're doing here reach more tribal people, because we're seeing that there's some resistance to Muslims within the tribes. And that comes from a place of just not knowing, not witnessing this work. And so it's great to see so many Muslims here. And it's great that we have elders attend now and then. And they've sort of, you've integrated through these sessions some tribal attendance. But we would like to see how we can share past sessions, this session, and any involvement going forward, or any movement going forward should involve more or a larger call out to others to attend, so that they can drop in and witness this and start to build that trust. Yeah, I think that Talitha and I did agree about the ego. Talitha, just before we wrap up and let everybody carry on, can you tell me your experience within the tribes regarding ego and leadership and different ones? Because I'm sure as the Muslims look on and they follow Facebook and they follow social media or different, as they are exposed to tribal initiatives, I'm sure they're going to see many faces out there. And I will name one. I do not cause war with anybody. I will name this person because I've seen it as a dangerous person who has stepped out and tried to represent my nation as a collective voice. And that person is Kanahus. Some people will, what are they called, Talitha? The name left me. Praise Allah.
They have the group called the Tiny House Warriors. They're operating out in Blue River and Secwepemc territory.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted her to comment on, not because I want to cause anyone to I don't want to cause a problem with Kanahus, but I will say that within my tribe there's problems, and I think that you guys will all agree that there isn't one group of people or one nationality or one race on this planet that can say they're 100% united, 100% one voice. And so I ask for your patience, please, as we try to share with you from our perspective what we've seen. That speaks to the division even amongst the tribes. And I believe 100% that we can find some action pieces and move past that. But we can't do that without first making onlookers aware that we are struggling from within. And we need your help in maybe helping us know how to move forward in a good way, even though there's these unresolved things. So if you could just share a little bit, Talitha, about what you see in the egocentric side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. And I actually, I talk to others in other nations across Turtle Island, and it seems to be sort of an ongoing thing with other nations as well. There's people that get into movements, and we don't know, sometimes they might go into it with a good intention and then get misled, and their ego grows, and the power of the ego overpowers their heart in ways. So we see that happening often, and sometimes, with Kanahus, we actually worked with her a long time ago. We did used to. She's actually related to me by blood. We share the same grandfather. So for me, having her as a family member, and then having to actually call her out on the things that I saw her taking part in, or even abusing me and abusing others, it was hard. And it's a hard thing to have to do that when it's your own family member. But I stand on, I believe in like the laws of morality and doing what's right, no matter what, even if it's family. So that's what I stood on when I did that. And I did have to speak out about her to actually try to warn others, because she's continuously going on a cycle of abuse, and it's ongoing. She's had many problems since then, more abuses. So I think when people get into a place of ego, it's going to cause harm, not only to the people they're working with, but to the entire movement of decolonization and resistance, because these people operate sometimes on almost like a club or a group together, and there'll be gatekeeping, we've found, where we can't work with other places or nations. Some of the media won't cover us, and it's supposed to be grassroots media, and they'll stop from sharing some of our work here because Kanahus has overstepped in there and said, no, don't work with them, don't share anything, and putting these blockages in place, which really stops the work. So we're always kind of having to regroup. Well, how do we work if we have this, it's almost like a hierarchy within the movement, we're supposed to be decolonizing, but here we have this hierarchy movement, which really works against us in those ways. So we see it a lot with the ego, and when the ego is overpowering somebody, it's just, I think, if you ask yourself and look within your heart, and when you ask about somebody, you can identify that and see if they're coming from a place of their heart, or, are they coming from a place of ego? I think if we all ask our higher selves, or ask ourselves that, we can identify that and see that. And moving forward in the times that we're in, we really need to be working from places of heart and of love and of peace and kindness, and not working from places of ego, because that's gonna bring a lot of us down,
Yeah, I was gonna say that the tiny house warriors and Kanahus manual, I don't want to bring a whole bunch of focus on that. Just I want you guys to receive this as us warning more towards people who run with their ego, and she's an example of that. It's our more intimate example. And I wanted to point out that just a correction with Talitha, and she'll agree with me. I have never worked with that lady. I have never, and she's a distant relative of mine. I've from day one refused to work with her. Why? Because the tribal way, just a little background, our tribal way, the original teachings tell us that from when a child is very, very small, we don't interfere with them. We don't interfere and try to tell them this is the way or that's the way. We try to just witness them, because children come to this earth placed here by God, and we're to witness them. And what we learned as a tribal people is that by allowing them to just be themselves and watching for their gifts, their strengths, we're also watching and monitoring for weaknesses or ego problems. And through watching them and not interfering, that's how we can truly identify how they are as humans relating to the earth, how they are as humans relating to each other. And through that, as they grow, that's how we chose our leadership. It wasn't because there was this hereditary lineage and doesn't matter if his descendants are evil or good, that's hereditary, therefore they're always chief. No, it was done in a way that through somebody's character, the character in which God placed them here, we could witness those that might have been chosen to do good deeds or chosen or more climated towards goodness. And that's how we choose people. And I can say from very early on, it was through the teachings of my elders that had me, even in how I was operating as a child, witness how Kanahus, for example, was behaving. And I witnessed some very I would call them straight up evil acts of her. And I always sort of flagged her as somebody to watch as she grows and make sure doesn't end up in a position of power. I didn't try to control that, but as time went on, I started watching media and I was shocked. Here's this woman out there representing the whole voice of our nation, saying, calling herself a warrior, when actually we all know within Secwepemc Nation that there was no such thing as a warrior. There were only peacekeepers. So when we had conflicts with our neighbors or anything, we always moved with peace. And that's where the peace staff came in. Was our Secwepemc tribe especially was very keen and very well known as peaceful group. And so we were actually among many tribes across Canada, the one tribe that always moved with peace and love. And therefore, when we would send warriors, as some are calling them today, it was actually our peacekeepers that went in and moved forward. And so Talitha and I, in summary, had agreed that we ourselves are going to also watch our terminology, but we're also hoping to help educate those who are watching our movements, watching Native initiatives, help them to understand more of a traditional and something from our origins, since time immemorial, better terminology that helps define what we're trying to do. And we as sisters have agreed that within our Women's Council, we really want to express that we're here arriving in a peaceful way, a loving way, and that's how we hope to handle any of these issues moving forward. And we thank you all for our time. And Talitha, if you have anything else you wanted to share, please, I don't want to cut you off.
I think that was pretty much all. Yeah, you covered it. It's with that hereditary structure, I did want to add, I mean, there is also, as Jabala said, we have to caution ourselves in even that structure. I've seen egos forming and growing in different parts of Turtle Island, and in the way that hereditary structure is coming about. One of my friends who's well-versed in some of the old laws and ways did share with me that the hereditary system actually was brought in by the church as well. So there's so much learning and unlearning. when it comes to decolonization, and so much has actually been hidden from history, hidden from us, and this is how they can maintain having their authority over us, because we are not in touch with those old laws. So understanding who we are, understanding the true laws and our true identity as descendants of the tribal people is key to that. And also understanding how to know where they're trying to create blockages and trying to create things that hold us back. So looking at the hereditary structure, if this is something that was brought in by the government or by the church in ways to control us, build egos up that work against us, then in that way, we do need to identify those things in moving forward in a good way so that we can work as balanced people with honor and protection and love, not having any sort of hierarchy type of systems in place. So just wanted to share that. And
that does actually,
sorry. Okay.
Sorry, I know you're really short for time. I did actually just want to touch on one thing, because this is back on that hierarchy topic. I had an elder, Mike Arnoose, who I really wanted to invite here today, and I will share this with them. But he shared with me the story of hierarchy among our tribal people. And he said, hierarchy is a modern term, first of all, but he did say that when we look at the structure of how the structure of creation, that Earth is in there, and it sort of goes like this up, and it also comes down. So there's no such thing as hierarchy. And the way he described it is the women are closest to Mother Earth. First there's Mother Earth, and in our human experience, then there's the women, then there's the men, the children, the birds, the animals, and it goes up. But then it's just like this circular process of how we all connect to each other. And that's where hierarchy should be completely removed, because we are all a piece of that puzzle. And even though it goes up sometimes, it comes down. And the point of the story was that it's all about how we are relating to the earth and how we live our lives, good deeds and bad deeds on the earth, that actually will affect us in the hereafter, or in the actual paradise that will happen after Dunya. So thank you.
Thank you both, Talitha and Jabala, for being involved in this conversation, for watching the recordings. I know, Talitha, you weren't able to be at all of the sessions, but you watched the recordings, and appreciate you just being here and being present and sharing your thoughts. And many of the things that you shared are things that I think, you know, are very common to all of us. You know, we're not a monolithic Muslim community. There aren't monolithic Indigenous communities. We have a lot of work to do within our own communities around whatever injustices, the problems with ego. And these are reminders for all of us as we want to work together, that it's not going to be a simple process. It is going to be a complex process. And I go back to the opening session that we had and the emphasis on relationship. And the fact that we're willing to spend time with one another and get to know one another, I think that's a good step in the forming of relationships between communities. I'm curious for others to share some of their reflections over the last 3 days. And some folks are asking just how long we'll spend, and this is part of the like colonial time structure that we're also living under, and I recognize the difficulties with it, but perhaps we can just spend like another 30 minutes or so at most. Just sharing reflections and trying to process together before we call this to a close.
I just wanted to pose something, and you guys can think about it, and then I hope somebody else will jump in, because I love to talk and I need to spend more time listening. I would like to suggest moving forward that we consider an ongoing symposium, or maybe create like an ongoing working group that can create some sort of a framework that anybody that wants to jump on board and start working with us can have a clear guide or a go-to. And I did make in the comments how we did this with restorative justice in BC. Restorative justice was actually based off of tribal teachings. And so it's now been incorporated into the justice system as an alternative measure. When we started seeing the white or the state adopt that and start putting it into practice in the justice system, the tribes saw there were some issues in its practice. And so we created a symposium that met annually. At first it met quarterly, I think, but we ended up having annual meetings, and we would do breakout rooms and come up with some very clear strategies. And then we would appoint a person that would speak for each breakout group and summarize, and then we would come up with some very clear action pieces. And it was a work in process for about 10 years. We've had some huge successes in just such a short time. And I'm just in my mind thinking if we could do something like that outside of what we've done so far, and create some sort of a structure that is a movement from the heart, and we can bring in some really great people that are more organized than me, because I am not very academic, but I can bring in a lot of the spirit and the soul side of things. But I really would like to see some professionals that are good at organizing these things stay with me on this, and work jointly side by side with the tribes. So any comments on that, I welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for that proposal. Asya already says that she's ready to be involved. I'm curious, others who had, maybe some of the action points that came out of their group reflections.
So maybe I'll start. One of the things that Maysa and I were talking about was having the mosques have a relationship, a community to nation relationship with the nation on whose particular land that mosque is built, and to have some kind of ongoing conversation and a move to thinking about reparations, or moving into some kind of ongoing kind of relationship. But I think the first part of that is doing what we were sort of talking about in the previous section, a lot more educating of the Muslim community in terms of and the mosque establishment, which is maybe not, the people who had come to this are not representative of mosque establishment, obviously. So to do more educating in terms of the history of dispossession on this land, and what the role is even of racialized settlers on this land.
Can I jump in? I'm sorry, I have to jump in. Big flags come up for me when we talk about that. Why? Because over the years since I gave Shahada, I have continually tried to work directly with the mosques and the imams. And I can say that I have become very frustrated with that, because, and I'm not saying it can't be corrected. I feel safe in this intimate group. I feel safe with the Muslims I've come to know outside of the mosque, or even some from within the mosque, because they really hear me. But what I'm seeing is that same problem I've been mentioning on in the chats, is how as good intentioned as the mosques and the imams or their leadership is inside the mosque, their contributions and their attitude towards how they support has been a problem for me. For example, I've seen over and over again the imam say, oh, it's okay, we contribute and this is how we do it and you can stay out. And I saw this with the fire relief effort, where I was in my own way with my tribe organizing some very clear support action pieces that were needed. And the imam was like, okay, Jabala, you can go to the side because we got this. We're working with your chief and council. We've got an agreement with them. And I'm like, the chief and council is not me. The chief and council doesn't speak for my tribe. And now you've informed me you're working with them and I can move out. So I'm not saying this isn't going to stay this way, but we need to, as an intimate, trustworthy, safe space group, figure out that piece for me before I will go and say, let's do something directly with them, and maybe educating them around those problems might be a piece of what we can do together before we take that big step.
No, I hear that completely. And I think the experience of being alienated from mosque leadership is probably one that many of us in this place right now deeply share. So I completely hear that. And I also think that that education process, that piece of educating non-Indigenous Muslims about the history of dispossession should not be on you. Like that is, I think, the work of non-Indigenous Muslims to take on, and to do the initial work to create a space where that relationship can move forward. But I certainly wouldn't expect, like, for Indigenous Muslims or Indigenous people or any Indigenous people to take that work on.
Yeah, and I agree we can use the mosques as a platform. They have been really good in saying, we want to do this, educate us, please, help us know where to access the information. And they're a great place to reach that broader community of Muslims that prefer to worship within just the mosque. Yeah, let's just leave it there.
Zainab, I see your hand.
Assalamualaikum. So on Itret's point with respect to the masjid, just so you guys are aware, I'm out in Mississauga, Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe land, and just about 4 weeks ago exactly, Sunday, I hosted, basically for my community, the Muslim community, more information on the link between the attack on the Afzal family with deeper colonial roots of colonial hate. I actually named it Indigenous and Muslim Education, IME, online seminar, something like the children caught in the crossfires from Islamophobia to mass children graves. So I hope inshallah I'll continue this, but I did find it very controversial, as Jabala said. However, it can be done. It can be done. It just has to be in a very controlled setting. Online is fantastic because you can control more of what the board has to say, how the president gets involved, but it's really about discussion. A lot of precaution had to be taken place in terms of our chief was allowed to, sorry, not our chief, the chief from the band council is able to speak freely. And if something controversial was said, hey, I was willing to get the flack for it from the board. So I think it's very possible. If you want to connect with me more on this side of the country, at least, how to do these so-called online seminars, I'm happy to connect with you. And, Jabala, I would love if you were one of our speakers, because you sure have a lot to say that our community needs to hear. And mind you, I'm in the part of Mississauga where the people here who've lived here, they're 4 out of 5 are visible minority. Can you shut the door, please? 4 out of 5 are visible minorities, and they've moved here within the last 15 to 10 years. I've been here for 26 years. There's a lot that I know I need to do on my part to educate my part of the community. And mind you, I'm a Pakistani background, so them even more so. I find folks from an Arab background are more open-minded. What from the Indian subcontinent, there's been a lot more closed-mindedness, but not our current generation. I feel they're more open, and that's who I'm trying to tap into. Thank you. Back to you, Aslam.
Zainab, yeah, and I think it definitely speaks to the need for, these are interconnected things, as we started with, right? So the need to decolonize our mosque institutions, our own understandings of Islam, and also as part of decolonization, it's like a lot of healing work, right? Like the healing work within South Asian communities, Arab communities, where there is still like a lot of trauma that hasn't been addressed or processed. And I think by engaging in some of these conversations together, it also helps open up that space for conversations about how we might be implicit or contributing, or our presence as settlers, and how can we then use our collective healing. And I think maybe just to point out, the Islamic History Month theme for this year in October is around anti-Indigenous racism and Islamophobia, the need for shared healing, right? So that will be like programming that could take place all over the country, sometimes in mosques and oftentimes outside of mosque spaces, to invite the communities to come together and understand these needs for shared healing. And I think it's also about changing the language that we use, right? I think that the language has come up time and time again, like what is the language that we use for this conversation? And can we make that language move outside of, you know, what's traditionally been given to us, right? Like the terms of engagement, either it happens at a mosque or at a university, but actually using words like healing that aren't often used in these spaces, you know, addressing trauma as a way of building relationships between people, or even acknowledging trauma before we even move into spaces of relationship building. So yeah, definitely a lot of complexity within this. And I'll ask Alia to step in.
Oh, first, I just wanted to highlight one of the questions from Jabala, Islamic month theme. If you could, I also wasn't sure what that was, if you could share more about it.
Yeah, so Islamic History Month happens every October all around Canada, and there's like a national board that decides on a theme every year. I just got involved with it last year, and the theme for this year I'll share in the chat box, but it's about anti-Indigenous racism and Islamophobia, and finding ways for shared healing.
Cool, thanks. I just wanted to share some reflections from our small group, and also some gratitude for everybody here and all of the speakers. I wasn't able to attend all of the days, but the time that I was here, I really found meaningful and enriching. The process that I'd like to share from our small group was, Sharona, I'm going to call you out. You were in my small group, and just, I guess, in reflecting deeply as Muslim women on, you know, how we've learned about our tradition and the unlearning that's had to happen there. And so really appreciating some of the conversation in the chat around like coming from the rib and where that maybe it was a weak hadith and things like that, and just joining and sharing appreciation that we're in community and are feeling connected. At least I'm feeling connected in this moment, around doing some of that unlearning work and deepening our own healing, both as a Muslim woman, but also as a settler. And so those are just reflections that I'm having that I wanted to share out. Again, just love and gratitude. In terms of moving forward, I think I'm really hearing how important the relationship building piece is between Muslim communities and Indigenous communities. And so I just wonder what that could look like, kind of like Jabala was saying, in terms of a working group, but also maybe a working group that highlights, you know, relationships that have started to happen already. So, you know, like this could be an example. If there are other relationships that have already started, really just speaking to the process and speaking to the tension that exists, speaking to the folks. I think earlier, Maysa, you had like shared the two folks who had talked about being of the diaspora, but also settlers. And so I think that that would be valuable for me personally, and it's something that I've written about as well. I'll put it in the chat just because it's a shameless plug. But you know, maybe just building on the relationships that have already started to form, the relationships even that Hazel spoke about in her personal life, and just highlighting those so that we know that there is hope and possibility, rather than, you know, the marginalization that continues to exist in both of these identity groups. So those are my thoughts, and thanks for listening.
For sharing, Alia. Yeah, and I think as a personal reflection, one of the things that really struck me was in yesterday's session where there was like this hot debate happening, and I was reflecting on like, you know, like I think that like academia is a space where like ideas are really contested, and I think there's so much value to add from that. But it struck me as so different from many of our other sessions that were so grounded in like spiritual belief, an idea that, and this also when I talk a little bit, I think a little bit about like how do we shift discourse, like to operate outside of the typical academic boundaries of what can be talked about, how we can talk about things, and where we can bring in our own spiritual journeys and feelings and emotions into conversations about relationship building, solidarity, moving forward. Yeah. I just wanted to check any other comments. I thought it might be nice as a way of closing just to hear from everyone, even if it's just like one or two words about, it can be anything, whether it's like a feeling that you're having or a thought that you're leaving with or a question that you're leaving with. And as a way of having sort of like a closing circle, so to speak. So yeah, just one sentence by way of closing, something that you've gotten out of the session. And I'll call on people, and if you aren't ready to speak, you can say pass and I'll try to come back to you. Alia, is it okay if we start with you as you've just spoken?
Sure. Can you remind me of the prompt, please?
Just one thing that you're leaving with.
I'm feeling connected, and I'm leaving with hope that I can remain connected to the Muslim community and the Indigenous community.
Thanks. Ifra?
Similarly, I'm just really, really grateful for this 3 days to have had this opportunity. It's at the end of a summer, the beginning. This feels like a time of transition to have this, and I'm just really grateful for all the organizers, for Aslam and your whole team who organized this, and for all the speakers. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I have a lot of things I need to sort of process and think about and figure out, but I'm just very grateful. Thank you.
Anna, closing thought? Jabala, did you have a closing thought?
Yeah, well, alhamdulillah, I'm feeling very grateful. I'm definitely in this moment asking for strength from Great Spirit to help me to carry on. And I'm thankful to all of you. What I want to say before we go is I'm also so sorry. I'm so sorry to my God. I'm so sorry to my Muslim family that the tribes haven't been able to embrace you fully. Forgive us because we have a disconnect from outside religions. So thank you for your patience. Thank you.
I was just about to call as well, and she stepped out. Sharona, any closing thoughts?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Shukran to the organizers and the participants, the speakers. My apologies, I haven't been able to attend as much as I wanted to. So just peace and blessings from Johannesburg, half across the world, but feeling hopeful, hopeful in terms of global solidarity and the labor of love in the work that we must do. So shukran to everyone, and thank you to the organizers and especially all the speakers. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I like Joburg is representing strong. Maysa?
I think I've just been really reflecting on, this idea of returning to the fitra, and really the importance of relationship building, but not in a symbolic way, in like an actual, like deep and connected way, is kind of a way of not resisting, but a way of moving forward from like all these complex problems that you've spoken about that maybe the solutions are not so complicated after all, are working towards them. And I'm also really reminded of Surat al-Asr, just like the closings of things. I think it reminds me of that surah. So yeah.
Talitha?
Yes, I just wanted to say Cook's Jam. In my language, we are taught that it's through translation, it means thank you. And I've learned now further beyond that, that we actually didn't have a word for thank you in our language. It was the closest possible thing in Secwepemc was this word, and it actually means you saved me. So it has this whole bigger, deeper meaning to it. So when I say Cook's Jam, I mean that from my heart. Cook's Jam, I believe that we're all here in our, earth and world to save each other in ways, to help each other, to collectively bring together that oneness again. So Cook's Jam, I feel this is a good meeting in that way of bringing more oneness among our tribes and our nations and people and humanity itself. So thank you for inviting me and having me here today. And thank you, Jabala, as well. Cook's Jam.
Cook's Jam for joining us. Sjodin?
Yeah, I'm so thankful and honored to be here and to learn from all of you. I think times are changing. I think things are happening. When I grew up in Richmond and Burnaby in the 90s and 90s, there wasn't a conversation about Indigenous rights, land theft, settler colonialism in the Muslim community the way that it's happening now. And so I just feel really excited that momentum is gathering and that something is going to happen, inshallah.
Cynthia?
Well, I feel very honored of being here. It's very important for me because a lot of what I have learned has been through reading and not meeting and being close to people and listening and to contacting in this way, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to go to Canada or to the US. So, I feel very emotional because it's important for me having these conversations and being part of this, even though I'm here in the very South, but I'm care about justice, and may Allah open our feelings, give us strength and give us the vision to be able to build something different, to reconnect with each other and to reconnect with the land and to reconnect with everything that we cannot see, which is part also of Allah and the creation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for accepting me here and for listening to what I have said. And thank you for all the such learning you have provided me in these 3 days.
Thank you, Cynthia, for joining and all your contributions as well. Hazel?
I'm so incredibly honored to be in this space and community with each and every one of you. And I'm reminded of the Mayan saying in Lakesh, which reminds me of the verse in the Quran of lita'arafu, getting to know one another, and the importance of genuinely knowing one another, and being grounded within our faith, but also knowing our identities, right? There's a saying from Imam al-Ghazali, those who know themselves know God. And so to be here and get to genuinely know who we each are and all of our histories, and have that grounded really foundationally within our faith, inshallah, to do what we're supposed to do and genuinely be trustees on this earth. So I'm leaving with immense gratitude, and I pray that to stay connected with each of you, inshallah. Thank you.
Asif?
So I've largely been covered by most of the speakers, but I wanted to say that I'm so proud of my brother for all of the work that he's been doing. Alhamdulillah, I'm so deeply grateful for just being in the space with all of you. Yeah, and I think just on a personal level, I've missed Islam a lot. So seeing his face has been really, yeah, it's been a real blessing, alhamdulillah. And yeah, so no, Jazakallah khair. I think it's been like a really blessed few days. And yeah, keep up the good work, Islam, inshallah.
Thank you very much. You know what they say, brothers that decolonize Islam together stay together. Zainab?
That was so sweet. I just made the connection that you guys are brothers. That's very sweet. I will have to say that I am super relieved to be connected to all of you. I thought I was the only one out here, but it's so nice to know that you guys are all over coast to coast. And I hope I can be connecting to some of you in the future. Talitha was talking about the meaning of thank you. I recently learned in Anishinaabe, for miigwech, there's actually no word for a thank you. In Anishinaabe, miigwech came because Credit River, when they used to trade goods, they would say, that's enough, that's enough. And so the English settlers took that as thank you. That's enough. That's all we need. But you guys have done tremendous effort. That's enough. You guys have done fantastic. I don't think thank you can even cover it. So Jazakallah for all your efforts, and may your efforts be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Can I add one thing to the cook's gem? Talitha was 100% accurate, but also in addition to that, when we say thank you in our tongue, it's actually like saying thank God, or it's identical to Alhamdulillah, because praise God that you saved me. Praise God. Thank God. God saved me. I'm saying you saved me, but actually we're saying Creator save me.
And how I wish we could be doing these conversations in non-English languages, but thank you for all of those who have brought your languages into these conversations. Dawood, any last words? I'm not sure if Dawood is here. I think Dawood wasn't feeling well earlier. Shanza?
Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I don't have my camera on at the moment. I'm having a few things happening here. So I just want to say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and a blessing to be here, and inshallah Allah help us to do a lot more action in taking steps forward for truth and justice and peace, and much more blessings to all my relatives and relations here. Miigwech, and that's enough for now. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all.
Jannah?
Jenna doesn't have a mic or a camera.
Okay, so, and Asya?
No. Bonjour, Assalamu alaikum. I don't know what else to say other than Coach Simple. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Kuitu and Chimigwech, really from this decolonized heart to yours. It's really a beautiful thing to see these deeper discussions happening, and I'm looking forward to developing these deeper connections and relationships buildings that have been here for many generations. And it's our sacred responsibility to continue that in all our relations. And I just wanted to say thank you for the blessed opportunity to just be here and absorb, and to center, share space, and to creator willing continue in tangible solidarity in ways that is that's coming with a strawberry heart and love in all our relations. Shukran. Thank you, everybody, especially all of the presenters. It was very profound, and what was being shared in the discussion is just, I think, for many of us, and the way that this was organized to be not compact all in one day, but on 3 days. There was great wisdom in this because it allows for the reflection, it allows to come back and to grow. And I think that we all are growing in a beautiful way. And I hope programs like this continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia. Dawood, I see that you're here. Did you want to share any closing thoughts? You're on mute, Dawood.
Hello? Was that, did you call on me?
I called on Dawood.
Oh, Dawood. Okay, great.
Thank you. Technology still sometimes becomes a stumbling block, so I struggle along as best I can. I think I'm from a different generation than everybody else here, maybe by 2 or 3 times. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد بسم الله. My dear brothers and sisters, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and keep each and every one of you safe, and with your clean intentions, may Allah raise them up and expand them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala join our hearts and our minds and show us a good way forward. The one thing that I would like to share, and it's been part of my life now for a long, long time, and I'll just quickly mention something that's been a blessing in my life for a long time, and that has been the association that I've been blessed to have with Dr. Elder Nigani Akianini, who is the head of Turtle Lodge Central House of Knowledge in Saging, Manitoba. So one of the big things that we all look for, that we all need, that we all seek, is a way to gain good knowledge from good people and have the opportunity to give our gifts and pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the Great Spirit will raise them up and find them acceptable. The one point that I wanted to share, I put this in the chat, but as Muslims, I think that we remember, hopefully we remember very often, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at one point was asked, who is most important for you? And his response was, your mother. Again, the question came, who is most important for you? And he said, your mother. The third time, he was asked the same question and gave the same answer. Only on the fourth time did he say, your father. From that, we should not understand that fathers are not important. But it does elevate and emphasize how critical, how important mothers are for all of us and for all of existence. The connection that I make, particularly for those that are familiar with Anishinaabe teachings, they know about the truth of the 7 fires and the generation that we're in now, that we're dealing with now. After all of the damage that has come from the East, there will come a time when the future of the earth, even the existence of the earth, comes to bear. This is an existential moment in history of the earth. And Islam teaches us that the earth is our mother. The references are made repeatedly to Mother Earth. So when we see the very real possibility, I don't want to say probability, because I believe in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything is according to His will. But this is an existential moment. The response that we make to our obligations to serve the people by loving the earth and healing the earth according to the little bit we can do, or together, maybe Allah magnifies it. But this connection between the immediate, urgent obligation, in my mind, is connected with the challenge that everyone that has joined or has contributed to organizing this important conference understands in the connected work, the struggle, the journey of Indigenous relationship building. I believe deeply, and I see evidence every day that the issue of environment and climate change is intimately tied to the knowledge, the embedded wisdom of Indigenous peoples in Turtle Island and globally. As Muslims, inshallah ta'ala, that strive to be sincere and to be found acceptable before the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this connection becomes so significant and so critical. And I close just again with a dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables us all to remain students, remain humble in our relationships on Turtle Island. May Allah make all of us relatives, relations, and allow all of us new people to accept that we need to acknowledge that we are the junior partners. And as such, we must always remain the students. Barakallahu fikum. Barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Afwan.
Thank you so much for your words and for your feelings and for your tears, Dawood. It's deeply appreciated. And the link between the rights of women and the position of women in our communities, and the link between that and how we treat the earth and how we are in relationship with Indigenous peoples is definitely all connected and one and the same. And I often think about the struggles for women in the Muslim community and how much there is to learn from the way that, separate from how Western feminism thinks about women, but actually I think there's like a deep respect and learn a lot of learning that we can draw from women as life givers, and find this nuanced way into the conversation that doesn't go to one side or the other, but finds a middle path. Lindsay, are you over there? Would you like to share anything?
I'm here. I don't have much to say because I only popped in at times for some of the sessions, and from what everybody is saying, I'm feeling like I missed some very important conversations. But I can say that I'm very grateful that this was organized. When I saw it, I was trying to promote it as widely as I could, because this is necessary. It's absolutely needed. So I look forward to definitely want to be part of anything that is being organized going forward. So thank you.
Sam? Sam, are you there? Maybe with that, I'll just hand over to Adil Iskander, and Adil is the incoming director of the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies for the next year. I just want to thank him and the center as a whole for kind of just letting me do whatever I wanted to over the last few years. And I've appreciated that freedom and flexibility. And I think that that's allowed for a lot of mistakes, definitely, but also a lot of opportunities to try things out. And it's the last event that I'm doing for the center before I step away to become a student. So I want to thank Adil and thank everyone who's been involved for giving me these opportunities. So over to you for the closing words, and then we'll say goodbye.
Thank you so much, Aslam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I have to say it's very difficult for me to offer closing remarks as it's such a hefty topic, the subject matter of the last 3 days. I was a bit of a fly on the wall the vast majority of the time, but I first want to acknowledge that I'm calling in today from the unceded traditional Syx territories, but I typically live and work on the Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and I want to say that the conversations that I happened to witness and eavesdrop on over the last 2.5 days or 3 days have been nothing short of landmark and revolutionary in my mind. This is we're treading turf and terrain that we should have been treading many decades ago. There are, of course, trendsetters. There are those who have been on this path before us, but nevertheless, this is the most concerted, most genuine, most compassionate, most candid, and the rawest I've seen conversations at this level, where we're really genuinely not only contemplating the responsibilities of what it means to be Muslim on Turtle Island, but also thinking through in a very sort of ontological way about what it means to be Muslim, what it means to be on Turtle Island, and really challenging a lot of those definitions in a manner that is, on some levels, very deeply unsettling, but also highly inspiring and uplifting. So there were some difficult moments. There were some, fiery moments here and there, but that is what it means to be alive, and that is what it means to be human. We keep contemplating and thinking, and trying to understand what constitutes universal humanity and our common bonds. And I really am touched by everything that was shared here. I don't want to single out names, but I just am so uplifted by everything that was said here today. So every interlocutor, every intervention, every presentation, every facilitation, the whole thing was really inspiring. When I think back to the time when Aslam joined the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies, we had very hefty expectations and very lofty dreams of where these discussions are going to go and what community engagement was going to look like. I have to say that those lofty expectations have been met and surpassed. So I want to stop to acknowledge and to thank Aslam for his remarkable contributions to the center as an institution, which, you know, we're so accustomed to institutions not doing what we expect them to do, but for once we get to share both the joy as well as the riches, because we've all been enriched by what Aslam has done in his capacity as the community outreach coordinator for the center, something that he does naturally anyway. So he will, I'm sure and I'm certain he will continue to do this in any and all capacities moving forward, but we have grown immensely as a consequence of that. I do want to add that even though my position as director is an interim one lasting a year, I hope and intend to continue in the path that Aslam was so kind and generous to have blazed for us. We will continue these conversations. We are available and open to creating the spaces that may or may not exist elsewhere, for those who feel the conversations are necessary. And of course, even when we don't feel like conversations are necessary, they are still necessary, and we will have them. So whether it's by means of workshopping, lectures, seminars, creating working groups, brain trusts, anything that will continue this conversation in a meaningful way and take us beyond talking towards more action. So we understand that those fault lines are difficult. We understand that we will find ourselves facing roadblocks every step of the way. And there are those who will serve as detractors and sort of veer us off course. But we are definitively and stubbornly committed to making this progress real and to bring together our respective communities in communion and in action. So I want to thank you all from the depths of my heart, more so than my mind, but also my mind. And I want to also say that we've also ventured into turf that rarely happens by bringing together academics, scholars, public intellectuals with community leaders. And those conversations are always difficult. I can tell you that as an academic, sometimes, most of the time, we don't have the answers, but we talk a big game, and so we have a lot to learn from the work that's being done on the ground. Jabala, Talitha, you know the work that you do, as do many of the other interlocutors with us today and in the last couple of days. We've learned tremendously from you, and we will take your guidance and your advice seriously, and we will actualize it in our future work. And I hope that some of the conceptual questions that we raise, while also unsettling as academics and scholars, help us, at least on a very incremental level, think of ourselves in a way that is more nuanced or more complex, without ridding us or shedding us of what means something to us, what matters to us. So the conversation yesterday around what it means to be a settler, what does it mean to be a colonizer, what does it mean to be an immigrant, a migrant, indigenous, what does it mean to be native? We can unpack and think about the etymologies of these terms in interesting and compelling ways, but it never shies away from continuing to drive us in the direction where our solidaristic commitment to action and to genuine change and real decolonization that is palpable and lived, that is the road that we're on, and there's no U-turn. So I thank you all for your time. I thank you, Aslam, for your commitment, and I look forward to seeing you all again and being part of this movement as we continue to progress forward. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thanks, Adil. Juma Mubarak, everyone. Amin to all the class. We'll have the recordings and all the resources up and shared, and look forward to continuing the conversation online and in other platforms as well. Take care.